It's my pleasure today to introduce to all of you my sister Diane Dardon. She's been with us on the Women's Thankoffering service for the past 2 years, and people have asked if she could come back, and I was glad to know that she was able to do that. So thanks, Diane, for being with us. She's going to share the word with us today from the Gospel of Mark, but it's going to be in an unusual format. She asked that rather than just her preaching straight by herself, that she asked if we could make it sort of a dialogue. So we're going to try that, and I hope that the word will come through in this conversation that we're having. But we're going to begin by reading our gospel lesson. Diane?
Thank you, Clay, and thank you for having me with you again today. It's just a joy to be with you and my friends at Trinity. Today we hear the gospel word from the Gospel of St. Mark, the 5th chapter. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered round him, and he was by the lake. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue, named Jairus, came, and when he saw him, fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." So he went with him. And a crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had. And she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. For she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" Jesus looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, some people from the leader's house came and said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." He allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. When he had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. Then he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the girl got up and began to walk about. At this, they were overcome with amazement. He strictly ordered them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. This is the gospel of our Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thank you, Diane, for reading the gospel for us and for leading us into this exploration of the word today. It's been great that you've been here the last two women's Thankoffering services, and the women really, really appreciate all that you've brought to us. Sadly, you can't be here in person this time. In fact, we're not even going to be together for Thanksgiving, which is sad. But it is great that we can use this technology to have you bring the word for us today. And so I'll let you get started here. But I have to say, boy, what a year we've been through.
Yeah, Clay, you know, it's been really fun being with you on a weekly basis as we Zoom call with the whole family and stuff. And it's those times when we're together that I realize that this has been just a year. It's hard to remember, actually, when I was in your church, when we were sitting in the pews and singing the hymns together and going up and having special music. It's hard to remember what it means to be sitting around at a table and having coffee and fellowship with family and friends. It's been a very hard year. And unfortunately, I think this year is getting worse for us. I hear the news that's coming out of Wisconsin, the alarming growth of the COVID-19 cases, and it just brings a chill to my heart and my soul. A year ago, when I was at Trinity, we could have never imagined that I would be celebrating this Women's Thankoffering Day with you again, and especially on Zoom. None of us could have imagined the burden that these scary times bring to our hearts and our minds daily. And so it is that we find ourselves in this crazy year in a pandemic in which every day we watch and wait and hold our breath and pray for healing and hang on to those threads of hope. But I have to say, as hard as this year has been, as we've lived through this pandemic, there have also been some real great moments of hope and celebration. For me, as a woman, one of those places that I celebrate is in watching our country trudge through an election. It's been like trudging through the deep waters and finally coming out on the other shore. And at that shore, like Miriam, we dance, because this election and this year marks the 150th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. We should all be doing a celebratory dance because of that. But because this year was tied to an election, we have extra celebration because for the first time in the history of our country, we have invited a woman to sit at one of the highest places in our government. What a remarkable thing that we are looking at having a female vice president. And that came as part of a celebration of 150 years of women voting. It doesn't matter what people think about Kamala Harris or if they even know who she is or what she's about. This is not a political thing. This is a celebration of the fact that women have made great strides in this country and in our lives. Indeed, the sheer fact that we have a female vice president stepping into place very soon makes us want to, or I hope causes us to want to pick up the tambourines and make a joyful noise and do a dance.
Yeah, it's fascinating that this moment of history has brought together a whole number of celebrations of anniversaries relating to women in positions of importance. Not only in our government and not only in places where they can vote, but also we've got a significant anniversary this very year in our church, in the ELCA, and you're part of that.
Yep, Clay, for me as a female pastor, one of the great celebrations of this year is that we are celebrating this year, and to be very honest, on this exact date, 50 years ago, the first woman ordained in the Lutheran Church in the United States. 50 years ago, a woman by the name of Elizabeth Plotz stood in front of the altar and had hands laid on her. And she took her ordination vows, just like you did, just like I did. What a great thing to celebrate. What a great cause for that singing and dancing. You know, you and I we were really kids when Elizabeth took her ordination vows, but the significance of her ordination and the way in which the church shifted to accept women into ministry has in many ways shaped our lives and our ministry and our church. When the Lutheran Church truly took Paul's words to the Ephesians to heart and recognized that in Christ there is no Greek or Jew, no male or female, the church was enriched deeply by the gifts that ordained women bring to ministry. And so today, we celebrate 50 years of women ordained into word and sacrament.
Diane, I don't want to question anything you're saying this morning, except I do want to say that I'm not sure you probably were, but I wasn't born yet when that happened 50 years ago. So you might want to rethink that.
Well, considering the fact that you're my older brother, I think your math is wrong.
I may not be able to get away with that. One of the things that is fascinating about this 50-year celebration of the anniversary of women in our church is that they selected certain texts to be used. And if I'm not mistaken, these are the texts that you selected for our use today on Women's Thankoffering.
Absolutely. They are absolutely the texts that have been used throughout the year across the country by congregations like this one and by assemblies that have gathered to take votes on other important things that have come up in our church. These are the texts that have been driving us throughout the year. Texts of celebration and dancing and texts about women and their strength and their faith. One of the things though, and this kind of takes us back to that whole idea of celebrations growing out of history. 150 years ago, there was the suffragette movement, and that really pushed us to a point in history where we have Kamala Harris. 50 years ago, women became ordained for the first time in our church. And today, as a result of that, we are in a place where we have a woman who serves as our bishop, the head of the ELCA. She is the national and international face of our church. And she is the result of what happened 50 years ago when Elizabeth Plotz had hands laid on her.
Yeah, you're talking about our presiding bishop, Elizabeth Eaton, also named Elizabeth. And it was my pleasure actually to be at the National Assembly on the day that she was voted into office as our presiding bishop. And it was wonderful to see the process at play. And she replaced our male presiding bishop, who was ending 2 terms. And she was elected by the assembly with a profound sense of joy. And of course, she served extremely well and has been leading our church. Now she is in her 2nd term as our presiding bishop. And it's an honor for all of us to work with her. I did have the chance to work directly with her when I was working as a seminary leader, and we would meet with her regularly throughout each year and talk about things that were important to theological education and to the larger church. So it was great to get to know her a bit.
Yeah, lucky you. And lucky you, because you were at that assembly, and I remember watching the videos coming off from the assembly and the great cheering and stuff. And let me tell you, while I wasn't at that assembly, that was a day that I was dancing again.
Now, if I recall correctly, and I'm pretty sure I do, you also personally have an anniversary that you're celebrating this year.
Yes, indeed. Clay, it was 25 years ago this fall, just a month ago, that I had the privilege of taking my ordination vows. And one of the things that made that moment so special for me is that we got special permission, and I say we because you were part of that conversation, got special permission from the bishop for me to actually be ordained in our home church, the place where you and I we grew up, we learned of the faith, we were led in the faith by all of those pillars, our parents and Pete and Signa Grambo and all those people who implanted the love of the church in our hearts and souls. We got to go home and I got to be ordained there. And to make it even better, and this doesn't happen very often, we got special permission from the bishop who gave you authority to preside over my ordination. That is something that will always for me be so special and is such a cherished memory.
Thanks. It was really an important and honorific moment for me as well, to be back there at Grace Lutheran in Tomahawk, which is a place that people around here are somewhat familiar with. They know I'm from Tomahawk, and they've heard me tell a fair number of stories about life at Grace over the years. And there we were, and it was, of course, my deep honor to be able to be part of that ordination 25 years ago this fall.
25 years ago, a year of anniversaries, isn't it?
It is.
My goodness. You know, I being a Protestant chaplain and the director of religious diversity and pastoral care at DePaul University, which is the largest Catholic university in our country, I found myself oftentimes as an ordained person somewhat challenged by working with a bunch of Catholics who do not see a place in their world for ordaining women. But I have to give my friends at DePaul some credit. One of my colleagues learned that it was my 25th anniversary, and she insisted, Clay, that I celebrate. My original thinking about celebrating my ordination, and I've been pondering it for quite some time, was to revisit my ordination vows, which I look at every now and then because I take them very seriously. But I wanted to just kind of go off in a retreat and reflect on those. And I did that to a certain extent. But my dear friend said to me, Diane, if you have a 25th anniversary of your ordination and you're the only female ordained person that we've got probably in this entire university filled with 30,000 people, we need to celebrate that. And I got a big kick out of her when she said, look at it this way. The priests celebrate every time they stub their toe. So we need to celebrate something as significant as an ordained woman in ministry among us. I agreed to be part of a celebration, but only with the caveat that it would be a celebration of all women in ministry, not just Diane and her ordination. But I really saw this as a time, especially in that setting, to uplift the significance of the work of women in the church and the role of women in the church and the constant servanthood that women bring in their roles in the church. And so we had a day of recognizing, instead of my 25th anniversary, we had a day and a moment over Zoom, of course, of recognizing all of the work that women do. And that's really what today is about as we come into this Thankoffering moment and this celebration here at Trinity. This is a day to celebrate the incredible work of every woman who steps through the doors in this church. It's a day to celebrate the breath that women bring to the community. It's a day to celebrate the hands that weave the prayer shawls or stitch the quilts. It's a day to celebrate the hearts that open up to children and youth and invite them into places where they're learning about their faith and learning about what it means to be a child of God. And so today is really a celebration as we come with thank offerings, however they're gathered in this virtual world. It's a day to remember and to reflect about or on the gifts that women bring. And I think one of the gifts that women bring to ministry, and it doesn't matter if it's ordained ministry, lay ministry, one of the gifts that I believe women bring to ministry is this strong sense of faith. That's a faith that was shown in that woman who was in the crowd when Jesus was walking by, and she'd been ill for so many years. And her faith was so strong that she knew that if she just touched his cloak, that her life would be changed. And indeed, she was healed. And that's the faith that I think women bring. And not that men don't share that faith either, but I think there's a depth and a passion about that faith that women in ministry bring into the community. It's an unswerving faith that we saw in our mother, that we've seen in all of the people that have surrounded us through the years, all the women who have been buoying us up and doing the work behind the scenes so that we can be out here and sharing the gospel in the way that we are called to do. And it's a faith that I believe pushes women into servanthood. This strong belief, their love for their Lord is so intense that there's just a passion and a desire to share it with the world. And that's what the women in your church, in this church, are all about. And so today we celebrate them. We look back in our history and we say, woohoo, 50 years, amazing, 25 years. I'd like to ask where those years went. But more importantly, we say, woohoo, look at the women in the church who have done so much, even in this pandemic time, continue to bring their faith to the forefront, cheer each other on, share their love for their Lord through the work of their hands and their hearts, and through simply being there for one another. What a gift women in the church are. And what a wonder that even in days like today that are so difficult, that we have sisters of the faith that cause us to celebrate and encourage us to dance and encourage us to hold to our faith and reach for the cloak and stand firm in what we believe in as we go through these days and as we continue to move the church forward.
Thanks. There are two things I want you to know. In terms of another kind of celebration, we celebrated the 90 years of life. One of our beautiful, wonderful members who made most of those red prayer shawls that we give to our graduates. You've seen some of those, you know what they look like. Her name is Joyce Boyden. She, like our mom, went to sleep on Sunday night and woke up with the Lord on Monday. It was a week ago. So we lost Joyce, but she was such a joy to this congregation and such a vibrant member with a tremendous sense of humor that we had a wonderful celebration, even in this strange COVID era, at her funeral the other day. So I wanted you to know that we have lost one of our great sainted women, but we certainly celebrated her wonderful 90 years. And the other thing I want you to know is that just as you have just now spoken about, the women of this congregation have been fiercely keeping up their ministry and doing all that they could, even challenging the idea that we can't use the church building to help them. We're being extremely cautious, and they've been very gracious and patient about it. But boy, they just want to get to work, and they have stayed at work in so many ways. And they too are the people that are leading this ministry, oftentimes behind the scenes. But right now, as you've nicely pointed out, there are so many anniversaries of women stepping out from behind the scenes so that they can exercise their roles of leadership in the church. Clearly, many women have roles of public leadership, such as pastors. They have the skills, they have the calling, the talent for all of that. What a joy it is that our church was one of the first ones, the Protestant denominations, to acknowledge that and to allow for that. So we all celebrate with you today, and we celebrate with all of the women leaders in our church, whether they're ordained or lay or working behind the scenes. It's a great day to remember all that women bring us. Even remembering the little mites and cents and pennies that they would bring through the years, for over 100 years, in their thank offerings, as they are doing again this time. So
And
thanks so much.
Clay, it just brings such joy to my heart, because the determination of those women that you're describing, and that itching just to be to work, that's the same determination that woman had when she was brushing through the crowd and just thinking, I just got to touch that cloak. And there's a determination about a woman of faith that just cannot be stopped. And that's what I'm hearing you describe. And even in the dear saint who is now sleeping, living, what am I saying, dancing with all the saints. She's one who through the years, I'm sure, has taught so many about that kind of determination. What a gift.
Like all of the women of faith, they do as this woman in the text did. They cling to Jesus.
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you for bringing us these reflections and the word this morning. Thanks so much for being with us. We look forward to the time when you can actually be with us all in person.
And let me tell you something, Clay, when that happens, there will be hugs for everyone, because boy, I'm missing that. Thank you for having me into your world again in this wonderful way, for letting me share some thoughts with you and to celebrate women with you. Thanks, Clay.
Thanks, Diane. God bless.
Thank you.